Right now I'm thinking that I'm probably being a little bit crazy here. I run quite a lot of courses on presenting, and one of the things I tell people to do is never present live with internet links, record it and set it up. But when I tried to do that for this, it really didn't convey what I wanted to convey about the dynamism of Prezi. And so what I'm going to try to do here is create a very, very simple presentation online. So I'm logged into my Prezi account. This is a free account, which means it's got their logos and bits like that. For a short amount of cost, you can have an account that doesn't have their bits and pieces on it. I'm going to say I'm going to create a new Prezi. So we're going to call this the Crazy Experiment. And online, no safety net. So that creates as our Prezi. I just need to get rid of this monitor. I have a monitor on my screen that tells me everything that's going on. And here we are, we're in the canvas. And the first thing about this is that it's very, very sort of free and form. So I'm going to start off by putting a title, and I'm going to call this the Prezi SWOT. And let's make that in this sort of title font. And in fact, let's give a bit of color scheme to the whole thing. And I'm going to pick here this one. And that will color in the slide. And put that under control. So what we've got there, if we do that, we can move this around. We probably want to make that a little bit bigger. So the whole of this is our canvas. So we've not got a deck of slides where we would do it in a normal sort of sequential fashion. We can just write as we might do on a big sheet of paper. And so we're doing strengths and weaknesses. So let's start off with strengths. And I'll use the other type of title font there. And what might we describe as the strengths? Well, I think one of the strengths is that it's new. We're always looking for something that's changed. Let's make that a bit of body text. What else is it? Well, it's non-linear. And it can be inexpensive. As you know, it's awful when there's somebody looking over your shoulder when you're typing, and I can tell you it's a whole lot worse than this. Now, this zebra device here, I just click on that. It's a bit smaller. And I move it around. So I'm just grabbing and moving things around. So I've got some strengths. Well, I better follow with tradition. And over here, we're going to go for weaknesses. Your microphone's live, I think, at the moment, Sue. Or Peter. If somebody else could deal with that, then that would be great. So what do I think some of the weaknesses are? Well, one of them is that there are no native charts graphs, and that's the wrong sort of font, so let's say that we want that in that sort of font. And what else have we got? I think it's a longer design process. But not everybody agrees. I think this sort of idea of just typing as you go, and I'm going to put no spell checker down because that's the one that's really worrying me at the moment because I am a little bit challenged in the spelling front. So if we go here, we can just make that smaller to make it more appropriate. We can then drag that and we can put it there. Okay, now there's perhaps not enough information there about this no native charts and graphs. So I'm going to flesh that out a bit with some more information. Charts and created elsewhere, and in most cases brought in via PDFs. So you might use Excel, you might use PowerPoint, something like that to make your charts, and then you're going to bring them in. Let's make that a little bit longer. Okay, then we'll make that smaller and smaller again because that's really a subsidiary point now. Now, one of the things we can do that's a little bit different is we can actually make that have a different rotation. So we're going to put that over here. In fact, we'll rotate it all the way around. So, I've got some strengths, I've got some weaknesses. Let's just move the paper up a little bit, give ourselves some space. And I'm going to talk a little bit less and just try to get this in now. So there's a heading, and we've got breaking the mold. That is an opportunity. You're a small country reporting up to a major country where the HQ of your organization is. It may well be that you can get some bit more attention this way, so it's eye-catching. I've certainly seen people use this in a workshop situation, including online workshops, and I think this could be great for qual debriefs. So we just need to move the paper up so I can see this OK button, and we'll reduce the size of that, put that into this heading. Okay, and the last one I'm going to put in over here is threats. That's in that sort of font, and then down here we're going to put in, I think there's an increase in time and cost, because it's hard to use the sort of things that Mike was talking about a moment ago, where you can really get some systematic thinking going. This tends to be very creative. I also worried that we might get design over form. So people might look at different things and make it more attractive. And as you'll see in just a moment, I'm a little bit worried about seasickness in some of the presentations. And just to get that into shape and form. So I've got some basic bits and pieces together now. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to group them so I can work with them a little bit more easily. So if I do that, I now have strengths and so on grouped in there. And we'll get another frame, and we will group the weaknesses. Move that up there. Move that over there, move that in. Probably ought to make this circle a little bit bigger too. We'll come to that later. So that's moving that as a group. That's good. I'm going to move it just out my way, and obviously normally I'd spend a lot longer at being tidy about this, and I wouldn't have lots of people watching me as I fly. So let's move this one down a little bit, and we'll have another frame over here. I'm going to move this one down a little bit. Okay, let's scroll out so I can see what I've got. Now, obviously, normally I'd lay those all out so they were the same size. And what I can do now is we can even show that just as it is. And so I click on there and it concentrates on, okay, it's the Prezi squad. Now I'm going to talk about the strengths, and it comes into here. We'll talk about the weaknesses. That's good, that's a bit too big. Scroll it back. If I click on here, Prezi knows to turn it around if I want to show that sort of detail. Now I'm going to just go back into design mode for a moment, because what I'm going to do is a couple of things which are really just to show the sorts of things it can do. So I'm going to take the weaknesses, and I'm going to make them upside down, and I'm going to take the threats, and we're going to turn them so they're on their side. So now when I do a show, the title comes up in the way that we'd expect it to do. But if I click on weaknesses, it does that rotation. And that's kind of what I'm saying, that I'm slightly worried about seasickness. And one of the things that I don't like about some people's Prezi presentations is where this rotation becomes a really dominant factor. And if you've sat through a few Prezi presentations, I'm sure you'll know what I mean. So that's great for a very freehand presentation, but you can go beyond that and you can add in a sequence. So we'll go one, and then we'll come down to the strengths, and then we'll go to the weaknesses, and then we'll come back to the title, then we'll go to the opportunities, then we'll go to the threats, and we will come back to the title. So now if I go over to do a show, then we can say take that away. We've got this button down here which will make it present, so it takes us to the strengths. Then I click on the next button and it takes us to the weakness. It does all that rotation for us. And if I were to just break away for a moment, concentrate on some detail and pull back and then pull back to the main part of the presentation, we can go all the way through and we can follow through a sequence. So we can put in a path which is going to take us through, and at any stage we can break away from that path. Well, that's fine, but that's really clunky, and you're going to be looking at that thinking, well, can you use it for a serious presentation? So here is one that somebody else prepared earlier. If you go to Prezi, you can see this one. This has been stored up there. And this is looking at whether Walmart is good for America. So this is Prometheus LLC. I've put this up there. I'm just going to show you a little bit of their presentation. So as we move forward on this deck here, what you can see is that we move in and we get a sort of a central view. So here's the overall picture of there. So we've got this very classic Prezi sort of look on the left-hand side with a circle and 5 circles around it. But it doesn't have to be circles. You see that I've got 2 square blocks up there. I'm going to follow their order to start with. It takes me to the history of Walmart, focuses in on some details. Now the orientation gives us a sense of movement, but it doesn't actually have some of the seasickness that you would associate with some of the simpler Prezi presentations. I can leave the sequence that they've set up and go and have a look at a particular detail and come back to the main structure. I can move forward to the next part of the structure. Actually, I'm just going to go back for a second, because within that we've got things like this piece of information up here. Right, we can focus in, so that could be really quite small. It could be very detailed information that I could be looking at us all the time. The next section that this particular presentation goes to is into the core competencies, and again we can focus on particular pieces of information within that. Takes us through. So the next thing that we might have looked at if we went through their plan was stockholders, so some information in here. Takes us through to charts. Remember, these have been brought in as PDFs. Some more charts, various pieces of information there. We can put links into sound, you can put links into video within that. Now maybe at this stage the client's saying, oh well, that's all fine and good, but what is it like for customers? So I just jump the sequence now and say, okay, well, for customers there were some great things going on, because in the recession it maintained low prices, allowing people to buy the necessities. But on the other hand, if we look at that from the employee's point of view, then what we'll see is, for example, Walmart, always low wages, so it's not always low prices. And similarly, we see over here, and I'm doing it a little bit fast for you now, so there probably is a little bit of that seasickness I warned you about, but actually if I was doing it at the speed that they had intended, it would be a little bit better. And what we see here is that the Walmart's approach to healthcare and the cost they're paying tends to throw costs back onto the states and onto the taxpayer. So we have a picture here which allows really 2 things. One is it allows somebody to present this information dynamically and to take interaction from the audience. Or if we delivered this as a product to somebody, they could actually go through and they could access the different parts. Remember Mike Sherman earlier was talking about different audiences. And I think that we need to bear in mind that quite often within a client there are different audiences. And this allows you to put something together in a way that's going to, at the moment, still be eye-catching. But will facilitate different people in different parts of the organisation being able to focus on their bits of it. I'm back on my slide just there, and I'd like to throw that open for questions and answers, Q&A.